My cheating ex-husband walked into our divorce. Hearing with his pregnant ex-girlfriend and smirked. Look what you lost. 10 minutes later, the judge asked one question that changed everything. My name is Olivia Carter. I was 36 when I learned that betrayal does not always arrive with lipstick on a collar or a hotel receipt tucked into a pocket. Sometimes it arrives quietly, as a feeling you keep trying to explain away because accepting it would mean admitting the life you built is already cracking. Ethan and I had been married for 7 years. From the outside, we looked stable in the way people admire without looking too closely. We had a nice house, steady jobs, shared friends, holiday photos, inside jokes, and all the ordinary little routines that make a marriage seem safe. People called us solid. I believed them because I wanted to. I had no reason not to, at least not at first. The changes were small enough to make me feel foolish for noticing them. Ethan stopped leaving his phone on the kitchen counter. It stayed face down beside his plate or tucked into his pocket even when he was just walking to the laundry room. If I entered a room too quietly, his thumb would move before his eyes did, locking the screen before I reached him. He started working late more often, always with explanations that sounded reasonable if I did not line them up too closely. He always had a reasonable explanation. Deadlines, client calls, or some manager who supposedly couldn't function without him. I wanted to be supportive, so I made dinners that went cold, sent texts telling him not to overwork himself, and pretended not to feel embarrassed when he came home smelling freshly showered from the gym he claimed he had skipped. The worst part was how normal he could still be. He kissed my forehead in the mornings, asked if we needed groceries, remembered to take the trash out, and occasionally brought home flowers in the same casual way someone pays a bill before it is overdue. Those gestures kept confusing me. A guilty man, I thought, would be more obvious. A man living a second life would surely slip in some dramatic, undeniable way. Ethan did slip, but not dramatically. He slipped because he underestimated how much silence can reveal. One night, after another late return and another vague explanation, Ethan fell asleep on the couch with the television still flickering across his face. His phone lay beside him, unlocked for the first time in months. I stood there longer than I want to admit, feeling ridiculous, ashamed, and terrified all at once. I told myself I would look only long enough to prove I was paranoid. Instead, I opened a conversation saved under a harmless name and saw Lena Reynolds' profile picture. Lena was his ex-girlfriend. He had once told me she was a closed chapter, someone from a younger, messier part of his life. Apparently, that chapter had reopened without my permission. The messages stretched back months. There were inside jokes, hotel plans, old memories revived like they had never been buried, and comments about me that made my skin go cold. Lena asked whether I suspected anything. Ethan answered, not a chance. She teased him about how trusting I was. He replied, she'll never figure out how long this has really been going on. That sentence did more damage than the flirting. It told me the affair was not only real, it had a history Ethan had carefully hidden while sleeping beside me every night. I woke him with his phone in my hand. He went pale before I said a word. How long? I asked. He cried. He apologized. He called it a mistake, then a weakness, then something that had gotten out of hand. He swore he loved me. He promised Lena meant nothing. He said he would end it immediately, block her everywhere, go to counseling, do anything I needed. I wish I could say I walked out that night with perfect dignity. I did not. I stayed because heartbreak makes people hold on to things they would normally walk away from. I stayed because 7 years is not something you stop loving in one conversation. I stayed because part of me wanted my old life back so badly that I mistook his panic for remorse. For 2 months, Ethan played the role of the repentant husband almost beautifully. He came home earlier, cooked dinner twice, held my hand in public, and asked me how I felt in a voice so careful it made me want to believe him. I tried, I really did. I hated myself for flinching whenever his phone buzzed. I hated scanning his face for lies. I hated feeling like the suspicious wife in a story I never wanted to be part of. What Ethan didn't understand was that I wasn't trusting him again. I was simply exhausted from constantly looking for lies. One Tuesday evening, his tablet lit up on the kitchen counter while he was in the shower. The notification came from an app I did not recognize. I opened it and found the same affair, moved to a different room in the same burning house. Lena had messaged him the morning after our confrontation. Did she believe you? Ethan had replied, completely. She's emotional right now. It'll pass. I did not scream that time. Something colder and steadier took over. When Ethan walked into the kitchen with wet hair and saw the tablet on the table, he stopped so abruptly he looked almost ill. "You messaged her the next day," I said. He tried the usual doorways first. Denial, confusion, the insultingly familiar, "It's not what it looks like." I let him talk because every sentence made my decision easier. By the time he finished contradicting himself, the marriage had ended inside me. Ethan simply did not know it yet. The next morning, I called a divorce attorney. She asked me one question after I explained everything. "Do you want to save this marriage, or do you want to protect yourself?" "I want to protect myself," I said, and hearing it aloud felt like setting down a weight I had carried for too long. From that day forward, I stopped reacting and started collecting. Screenshots, bank statements, hotel charges, restaurant bills, gifts I had never received. Weekends he claimed were business trips, but were clearly anything but. The money hurt, but the effort hurt more. For years, I had been asking for time, attention, and small signs that I still mattered. Ethan had all of that to give. He was simply giving it to someone else. For 3 months, I lived beside him like a woman keeping a secret from a thief inside her own house. He kissed my cheek in the mornings while I backed up files at night. He asked about my day while my attorney organized the timeline of his affair. He brought flowers once, and I almost laughed because by then, even kindness felt like strategy. When the divorce papers were ready, I placed the envelope on the kitchen table before he came home. He noticed it halfway through telling me about work. "What's that?" "Open it." His face changed as he read. Confusion gave way to shock, then anger, then fear when I slid my phone across the table and showed him screenshots from 3 days earlier. "You went through my messages again?" he said, as if that was the crime. "No, Ethan, I finally stopped believing your lies." That was the last night he pretended to be sorry. Divorce showed me a side of Ethan that marriage had hidden. Once he understood I was not going to forgive, the tears disappeared. He stopped asking how to fix us and started asking what he was entitled to. He told people I was cold, controlling, impossible to please. He suggested I had pushed him away by focusing too much on work, as if infidelity were an accident that happened to neglected men instead of a choice he had made repeatedly. I did not defend myself publicly. My attorney told me silence would serve me better than emotional explanations. And she was right. Ethan could tell stories. I had dates, accounts, messages, and records. Still, staying quiet cost me more than I expected. Friends grew distant. One woman I had cried with at my bridal shower asked whether maybe I had made Ethan feel unwanted. I remember sitting across from her in a coffee shop, realizing she did not want the truth. She wanted a version of the story that made betrayal feel preventable. The legal battle dragged on. Ethan wanted part of the house, even though I had bought it before the marriage and paid almost every mortgage payment myself. He wanted financial consideration because, according to his lawyer, he had contributed to the household. My lawyer answered that with bank statements. Again and again, his claims ran into something solid. As the final hearing approached, Ethan changed in a way I could not read at first. He seemed too confident. Not peaceful, not relieved, just smug in a way that made my stomach tighten. A week before court, I saw him by accident leaving a restaurant across town with Lena. He had a hand on her back and a smile on his face. She was pretty, blonde, and visibly nervous. I noticed that part more than anything. Ethan looked like a man enjoying his new life. Lena looked like someone carrying a secret that had become too heavy. On the morning of the hearing, I arrived early because I wanted it over. I wanted my house, my name, and my future separated from the chaos he had created. The courthouse was cold and crowded, full of people clutching folders and wearing the exhausted faces of those whose private pain had become public procedure. My attorney met me near security, reviewed the final points, and said we were prepared. Then Ethan walked in with Lena beside him. She was pregnant, not newly pregnant, not barely showing. She looked about 7 months along, maybe more, and Ethan guided her into the courtroom with the careful pride of a man who wanted everyone to see exactly who stood beside him. His confidence finally made sense. He had been telling people the baby was his. He believed, or wanted the court to believe, that this pregnancy changed everything. It was supposed to make him look like a man building a new family and make me look like the bitter woman trying to take stability away from an expectant father. When proceedings began, Ethan's attorney stood and informed the judge that his client's partner was expecting a child and that future financial obligations should be considered. The room quieted. The judge looked at Lena, then Ethan, then me. "Ms. Carter, were you aware of this?" "No, Your Honor." Lena rested a hand on her stomach, lifted her chin, and said loudly enough for the front rows to hear, "Look what you lost." I had imagined many things before that hearing, but not the strange calm that settled over me in that moment. Maybe they expected me to cry. Maybe Ethan needed me to look wounded so he could feel powerful. I looked at Lena, then at the man who had destroyed our marriage and still needed an audience for his victory. "Congratulations," I said. That one word bothered them more than anger would have. My attorney stood soon after and asked to submit the affair timeline before the pregnancy was treated as relevant. Ethan's lawyer looked annoyed until he began reading. The judge read quietly. Pages turned. The air in the room shifted as the dates started doing what dates do best, refusing to flatter anyone. The affair between Ethan and Lena had resumed at least 10 months earlier. The messages showed hotel meetings, travel, physical intimacy, and conversations detailed enough to make the timeline undeniable. Lena was approximately 7 months pregnant. That alone did not prove anything, but it raised the question Ethan clearly had not prepared to answer. The judge looked over his glasses. "Mr. Carter, according to the materials submitted, your relationship with Ms. Reynolds resumed roughly 10 months ago. Ms. Reynolds is currently about 7 months pregnant. Would either of you like to clarify the paternity timeline?" Ethan turned to Lena. It was the first time that morning he looked uncertain. Until then, he'd been sitting like a man convinced he had already won. His expression changed before he could hide it. He was not performing anymore. He looked confused, and that confusion told me something I had not considered. Maybe Lena had lied to him too. Lena stared down at her hands. Ethan's attorney cleared his throat. "Your Honor, my clients declined to make any statement regarding paternity at this time." The judge did not need to raise his voice. His tone did enough. "This court is here to dissolve a marriage and determine asset division. Unless the pregnancy has direct legal relevance, it will not influence these proceedings." Ethan's attorney tried to argue future obligations. The judge shut it down. If Ethan wanted to claim responsibility for a child, that was separate. If Lena wanted support, that would require proper paternity proceedings. The divorce would be decided on the marriage, the assets, and the evidence already before the court. After that, Ethan's plan collapsed quietly but completely. My attorney showed that the house had been mine before marriage and that the payments came from my accounts. Ethan kept his car and personal belongings. There was no alimony. Each side handled their own legal fees. The marriage ended in a stack of signed pages, far less dramatic than the years it had taken from me. Outside the courthouse, Ethan caught up to me on the steps. "You knew what your attorney was doing," he said. My attorney submitted the timeline. "You humiliated us." "No," I said, too tired to soften it. "You brought a pregnant woman into court to use against me. The dates humiliated you." He looked back toward Lena, who stood near the doors with one hand on her stomach and no victory left on her face. Ethan did not chase me after that. He had another problem now, and for once it was not mine to solve. I drove home to my house, parked in my driveway, and sat there with both hands on the steering wheel. I expected to feel triumph. Instead, I felt quiet. The kind of quiet that comes after a storm has finally moved far enough away for you to hear yourself breathe again. But the pregnancy had not finished destroying lives. It had only started. The fallout began almost immediately. Ethan demanded answers from Lena, and from what I later heard, the conversation did not go well. She insisted the baby was his, then accused him of humiliating her by asking questions. He asked for a paternity test. She called that insulting. There was something almost poetic about a man who had cheated on his wife discovering that trust becomes difficult once betrayal is part of the foundation. For several weeks, I stayed out of it. I blocked numbers, ignored rumors, and let my attorney handle anything that looked remotely legal. Lena's family tried to paint me as heartless. Ethan's relatives hinted that I had abandoned a child I could not possibly know was not mine, which was absurd in more ways than one. I was not the pregnant woman's partner, I was not the father, and I was no longer married to Ethan. Still, people will believe almost anything if it gives them someone convenient to blame. After the baby was born, the first official paternity test was ordered for Ethan. He was not the father. I heard that through a short message from Ethan's sister, who had stayed polite to me even after the divorce. Her text said only, "You were right about the timeline. It's bad." A few days later, Ethan messaged me from a new number. I almost deleted it without reading, but curiosity got the better of me. "She lied to both of us," he wrote. "I know I don't deserve a response. I just needed to say that." He was right about one thing. He did not deserve a response. Lena tried to insist the test was wrong. When that failed, attention turned to another man, someone she claimed had been a brief mistake during the same period. That test came back negative too. By then, whatever sympathy she had built around the pregnancy began to crumble. People who had repeated her version started deleting posts. Friends who had judged me suddenly became quiet. Eventually, the real father was identified. A man from her gym she had been seeing on and off long before Ethan believed he had won her back. He wanted nothing to do with Lena beyond court-ordered support. Ethan, who had destroyed a marriage for a woman he thought had chosen him, learned he had only been one name in a much longer list. According to mutual acquaintances, Lena eventually moved back in with her parents. The relationship she'd fought so hard to protect was gone, and the future she had imagined with Ethan disappeared almost as quickly as it had begun. I wish I could say that was the end of it, but people who build their lives on denial rarely stop just because a lab report tells them to. Lena contacted me twice from different accounts, accusing me of ruining her life as if I had somehow arranged the dates, the messages, and the DNA results myself. Ethan showed up at my office once, not violent, just desperate and humiliated, asking if we could talk like adults. Security asked him to leave. My attorney sent a formal warning after that. When Lena escalated with more messages claiming I had turned everyone against her, my lawyer filed for a protective order. The judge reviewed the messages, the prior court records, and the paternity results, then made it clear that neither Ethan nor Lena had any reason to contact me again. That order gave me something I had not felt in over a year: space. Recovery was not cinematic. There was no dramatic montage of me becoming instantly stronger. Some mornings I woke up relieved. Other mornings I woke up angry over a detail I had not thought about in months. I started therapy because I did not want Ethan's betrayal to become the lens through which I saw every person after him. I went back to old routines slowly. I repainted the guest room. I changed the locks. I replaced the couch where he had fallen asleep with his phone beside him, not because furniture mattered, but because I wanted the house to feel like mine again. The legal fees hurt. The gossip hurt too, though less than I expected once the truth came out. What surprised me was how much peace can feel like emptiness at first. When your life has been filled with crisis for so long, quiet almost feels suspicious. I had to learn not to brace for the next disaster. Friends who had defended him stopped calling. The relationship he'd sacrificed his marriage for had collapsed. He had lost the marriage, lost the relationship he thought was his future, and become the subject of the same whispers he once believed would follow me. The certainty he'd carried into that courtroom was gone. All that remained were the consequences he'd spent months convincing himself he could avoid. By the time he reached out, he sounded less like a man trying to justify his choices and more like someone finally forced to live with them. Months later, Ethan sent one final message through his attorney. It was not an apology exactly, but close enough to recognize regret. He admitted he had believed Lena when she told him the baby was his. He admitted he had brought her to court because he thought it would make me look cruel and make him look like the one with a future. He admitted he had been wrong. I read the message once and put it away. Regret is not the same as repair. By then, I had already stopped needing Ethan to understand what he did. That was the strange gift of surviving the whole thing. In the beginning, I wanted everyone to know what he'd done. Later, I wanted an apology. By the end, I didn't need either of those things anymore. I just wanted my life back. People sometimes call that revenge, but it never felt that way to me. Watching their relationship collapse didn't make me happy. Keeping the house didn't erase the damage. What mattered was finally waking up without anxiety, without lies, and without wondering who I could trust. The real revenge was waking up in a quiet home with my name on the deed, my coffee on the counter, and no one beside me who made me doubt my own instincts. Ethan walked into that courtroom, believing he was showing me what I'd lost. Looking back, I suppose he was right in a way. Someone walked away from that courtroom with less than they came in with. It just wasn't me. I locked my front door, set down my keys, and stepped into a home that was finally peaceful again. For the first time in a long time, the future felt bigger than the past. And that future belonged to me.